It's Thanksgiving week, and so we only have one show, and we're going to try to fit everything into that one show. So we're kind of doing a split schedule here. We're going to recap some of the games that happened yesterday, as well as look ahead, because we don't have a second show this week. But what we're looking ahead to is not Week 12. We're looking ahead to the rest of the season, and we're going to take a look at all the playoff races that have significantly tightened over the last few weeks and try to project those going forward for the remainder of the year as we hit the home stretch. The AFC is, to put it lightly, a lot tighter than the NFC, but we're going to go over all of them nonetheless. Before we get into it, EJ, buddy, how you doing?
This is our turducken of a show. We're just going to pack it full of everything. We got a little bit of recap, a little bit of looking forward to playoff races that are starting to take shape, but a lot of them are still really close, so we'll go through all those, and then we will release you all to, go fill your own Bumpus Hounds table and see if you can, travel, meet family, do whatever it is that you do for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving and football, man. A lot of it coming, a lot of it happened this week. We'll try and give you a taste of both.
Have you decided how you're doing your turkey, by the way?
I am cooking, but I'm not cooking the main stuff. I'm doing a couple sides and a dessert because we're going to go to my sister's. So I do not have turkey responsibility this year.
Neither do I. I'm on potato duty.
Me too.
I'm the potato guy, and so I'm doing mashed potatoes. And I'm just a secret, by the way, for all of you that do your mashed potatoes at home. Don't boil them in water. Boil them in chicken stock. It comes out way better. Like way, way better. So there's your tip of the year on how to do good mashed potatoes for Thanksgiving. All right. First game on the docket. We're going to get right to it because we have a lot of stuff to do this week. Steelers-Browns. This kind of had the look of a messy game going into it because you got DTR making his second career start. This one he actually had a few days to prepare for, unlike the last one against the Ravens where he found out like 3 hours before. And he was going up against TJ Watt in company and of course, Kenny Pickett on the other side. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on this because there's a lot of negativity in Steelers land right now, and I don't want to feed too heavily into that. But at the same time, I want to validate the feelings of Steelers fans everywhere and say, yeah, the Kenny Pickett thing ain't working and the Matt Canada thing ain't working. I think if you're trying to assign blame to it, I would say yes. Like not either or, I'm saying yes. And they remind me of like a toxic couple that you observe from afar where you're like, neither of you are good for each other. Like you're both kind of equally at fault here, right? The offensive structure, I've done a long study on it before and talked about all the problems with it, the lack of aggressiveness, the really dumb run calls on second and long. Like all that's well documented, but even just Pickett himself on throws that they did call down the field, like Solak put out a cut up of like every throw past the sticks from this game. Kenny didn't hit anything. So even when they tried to go down the field, Pickett was just straight up bad. So if you're asking, what's the main problem in Pittsburgh? I don't know, all of it, like at the same time, simultaneously. I don't really have hope for this offense right now going forward. And even though they have the 7 seed right now, doesn't feel like they're going to have it for very long.
It's almost everything everywhere all at once. The one saving grace, probably Jaylen Warren. But these are two teams that look really very much the same. They both have very good defenses. Obviously, both not getting a lot from the quarterback position for completely different reasons right now. But going into this game, it was kind of like two teams, it's the Spider-Man meme or two teams looking in a mirror going, oh, they look a lot like us. And that's the way the game played out for the most part. Very low scoring affair. Defenses controlled this. DTR did just enough on that last drive to get him into field goal range. And, the Browns ended up winning the game. For the Steelers thing, like Kenny Pickett is, he is kind of historically awful at this point in terms of what he's getting done inside of that offense. 315 quarterbacks have 500 pass attempts since the merger. This is the AFL and the NFL merging to become the modern NFL. This is a long time. Only one has thrown a touchdown on fewer than 2% of his attempts. And his name is Kenny Pickett. Like, that is a long time, folks. That's a lot of football. That is 315 quarterbacks to hold him up against. This is not cherry picking. It's not about rookies or young quarterbacks or anything. It's all quarterbacks since the merger. He's the only one that far down. Yes is the answer. It is not working across the board for the Pittsburgh offense. And yeah, they technically have a seat at the playoff table right now. It really doesn't feel like that's going to continue unless something changes on offense. And I don't know what that something would be, because they've already made the change that we asked for the most, which was Jaylen Warren getting a whole lot more touches, or maybe less touches, but just being, effective, as we said he was going to be explosive. And he showed that yesterday, but that's not enough.
Warren, and I want to highlight him because you mentioned him, but he's kind of the only thing that works for them. And he's the only reason they even have the offensive production that they do have, what little of it they do have. I would say he's been almost as important for them on offense as TJ's been on defense in terms of just somebody going out and making a play. He leads all running backs in the NFL at missed tackles forced per attempt at 0.41, which is an absolutely nutty number. That's like Javonte Williams in college. Like that's the level of forced missed tackles here. His yards per carry average is at 6.2. He has the highest first down or touchdown percentage on the team by far, and the fourth highest overall in the league at 31% of his touches moving the chains or scoring. He's a great receiver. He's a dog in pass protection. Like, he's everything. He is their best running back. And I don't even think that's a debate at this point. Like, he is their best running back, and yet he's only getting 28 snaps a game. So, again, that's also partially on Matt Canada for just not giving him touches, or at least the amount of touches he should get. It reminds me a lot of Austin Eckler when he was behind Gordon, right? Where Eckler, like, we saw this young Eckler kid came out of nowhere, and we're like, who's that? He should get the ball more. And then it took like 3 years, but he finally got the ball more. It's like, oh, yeah, he's really good. Who knew?
Yeah, just to put it in perspective, Kenny Pickett yesterday threw for 106 yards, which, yes, that's abjectly terrible. Jaylen Warren ran for, not receiving, 129 yards.
Yeah, it was bad. That was also, I believe, the fourth time this year that the Browns defense has held a quarterback to 110 or less. And they came very close to having the third time this year of allowing less than 100. Like, Tannehill got 104. Like, this Browns defense is
good,
no joke. Good, right? And they had DTR's back. DTR, I thought he was okay. I think he had a better first half than second half. They kind of emphasized the quick game a lot, similar to what they did with Deshaun in the back half of the Ravens game. Weren't really going down the field. Like, they did like one off of a boot that he hit, but they were really emphasizing quick game and yak and doing all the same kind of stuff they did with Deshaun, and he was okay at it. Nothing catastrophic, but also nothing crazy good. He did enough to win the game because his defense is insane. As for whether or not this is sustainable for the rest of the year, like they're a 7-3 ball club, we'll see. Like, DTR will have to play better and make some clutch plays if this is going to work down the stretch. I think there's a possibility it could, but at the same time, if there was ever a team to get your first start against, it's going to be the Steelers, because the pressure to score points is not that high against them.
The defense, his first two starting defenses, Ravens and Steelers, both divisional opponents for them. Not an easy road, but I look at his first, true start, like you said, where he had any kind of notice. And it doesn't look all that much different. It does in depth of target than like Aiden O'Connell's first action with the Raiders, where he made a bunch of mistakes, showed a little bit of promise, and we all said, he's got to play better. And lo and behold, here later in the season, he has a little more tread off his tires, a few more starting reps, and Aiden's starting to play better. I feel like, the Browns are going to need that from DTR. They're going to need that improvement with these reps to play better down the stretch, or else they're going to fall short. But I'm not saying that can't happen, because he's proven throughout his career, and certainly in college, that he is a learner and that he will adapt. That is one of his strengths. So there's hope here, Browns fans. We said we thought this game was winnable. They won it. Do they need to do more? Sure. Is that, at least a possibility based on history with DTR? Sure.
Speaking of AOC, by the way, let's talk about Raiders-Dolphins. Second game on the docket. Aiden, I thought played encouraging overall, but he still he still does get a little bit too much dip on the chip from time to time. I would say the aggressiveness on the whole has given them a better chance to win than what they had, with Jimmy, of course, and with Hoyer. But that second to last pick, the last one I don't necessarily hold too much against him. It was like 30 seconds left. He's taking a shot to the end zone. They're down by 7. Fine, whatever, right? But the second to last one where he's like trying to save a sack and he's just trying to get an incompletion, he throws it up and then it gets picked. It's like, all right, kid, come on. But, average depth of target 11.3. He was taking big swings down the field the entire day. Arguably, the main reason they were even in it was because one of those big swings went to Devontae for a touchdown. But you would like to see him kind of rein that in just a little bit so that they don't put themselves into trouble consistently.
It's a challenging proposition with Aiden, and we knew it would be, because that is his full character as a passer. He is going to take the chances. He is going to push the ball. He has pride in that. He is also pretty good at self-scouting and understands when he gets too much on it. And he's learning, but he's got to put that learning into practice about when those windows are going to close, about when I just need to take the sack and move on. And it's adding up. We would like it to add up faster, but I would encourage all of us, including Raiders fans, to rewind this a month and ask if they felt that Raiders team with Jimmy G and McDaniels had a chance against the Dolphins. And I think the answer would have been a resounding no. What are you talking about? That's not even in the realm of possibility. They were in this game for the most of it. This was a close game, and it is because they're a whole different team under Antonio Pierce. We've seen that transition sweep through the locker room and the ranks of players. They look completely different. And Aiden will push the ball down the field, and Jimmy won't. So, yep, we want him to do the good stuff and a little bit less of the bad stuff. That's hard to separate. It's kind of his quarterbacking DNA. He is going to push the ball. We'd like him to be just a little bit smarter about it, but make no mistake, the sort of Antonio Pierce switch, which then led to the switch to Aiden, makes this a completely different and more competitive football team.
They also got to get better up front. Couldn't really run the ball at all. I don't think they had any successful run plays on the day, maybe like one or two. And pass protection was an issue, and Thayer Munford got just abused out there. Parham had a rough game at guard. So, Aiden was under siege quite a bit, but still, in the National Football League, you're going to be under pressure. Got to handle it better. But the Raiders, I think, this offseason should probably invest a little bit more on the offensive line. They can't. They need more depth, to put it diplomatically speaking. I don't think they can go into next year with this group of 5. There's just the pressure's been too consistent this year for my money.
It's tough to have Josh Jacobs and come away with 39 yards rushing, under 3 yards a carry. Like you would say for a young quarterback, oh, you've got Josh Jacobs, just lean on him, right? He'll be your safety blanket. They tried. It's not that they didn't give him any carries. It's not like he had sub 10 carries in this game. He had 14 carries and, he ends up with 39 yards. That's not something you can lean on offensively and keep drives going.
On the other side, Dolphins were not even a little bit sloppy. They were a lot of bit sloppy. Tua had the early fumble. He had a pick to start the second half, which I think might have been a miscommunication. And I was kind of watching back the All-22 on it. There was a middle field safety, and so it kind of looked like the post was flattening down to get under the post safety, and Tua thought that he was still going to carry it deep, and so Tua left it deep, and the safety got an easy pick. In terms of who was right and who was wrong on that one, I probably lean towards the receiver because he's just reading where the safety is and he's running to grass, and Tua just misread it, I guess. But still, that's a mistake that you can't have coming out of locker room. Like, you get the ball back on kickoff, and then you just forfeit a possession, basically. So there was a lot of mistakes from the Dolphins. Like, Tua almost threw another pick in the red zone that Spillane dropped. Not a super clean game from him, but the fact that you have yak threats like Tyreek that can turn a good play into a great play, it goes a long way for covering up mistakes when you have that much explosiveness on your offense, that even if you don't play your best game as a quarterback, you could still end up with 300 plus yards and a couple touchdowns just because the dudes that you're throwing to are just that damn good.
The Tua-Tyreek connection was the one the Dolphins leaned on in this game, and it's the reason they keep the lead in the AFC East. It's the reason they beat the Raiders, which we, again, wouldn't have said a month ago. But, yeah, their dudes are better. When you complete balls to that guy, he's going to make you look really good. He did yesterday. He was the catalyst for their offense. Other guys contributed as well, but, like, the major chunks, the big plays, the pressure they put the Raiders defense under came from that Tua to Tyreek connection. It's the reason they won this game.
I think overall, this game was a testament to the fact that the Dolphins, like, they will run into speed bumps of their own making quite frequently. Against a better team, this probably would have ended up being similar to the Bills game, where they made a couple early mistakes and then just got like a landslide on top of them. You know, Philly, they made a couple mistakes and then they just got leaned on in the fourth quarter. Like, they can't afford to make these mistakes against top-tier teams, which is why they keep losing to top-tier teams, because they just can't play a clean game. But against I would even be generous and say a mid-tier team like the Raiders, their margin for error is greater because of their explosiveness. But they can't get away with this against Buffalo when they play against them again. They can't get away with it against Kansas City in the playoffs. Like, they can't. They have to learn to play a clean game. And so far this year, they haven't done that very often.
Is it fair to call the Raiders freshly mid?
They are freshly mid. And to be honest, like, if you go back to the summer preview series when we were talking about the Raiders, we even said at the time, like, they're not going to be the worst team, but they're not going to be the best team either. Like, they are just solid middle of the pack. Like, they're there. They exist. Like, that is the Raiders this year. I'm excited for their future because I like Antonio Pierce. And I am a fan of Aiden O'Connell, and I hope that he can turn into their own Kirk Cousins. I don't know that he will, but I hope he does because I like the guy. But, yeah, that is a solid mid-pack Raiders team. They can either beat everybody or lose to everybody.
Yeah, I think freshly mid is an upgrade that their fans appreciate, because they were not mid in the beginning of the season. They were one of the lower class teams in the NFL. They couldn't beat anybody. They couldn't really get out of their own way. And while mid might sound like typically it's an insult right now, that's an ascension for them. And they are figuring some things out. They're getting some more reps to look at Aiden and see whether or not he's going to be their guy going forward. They're also figuring out things about the rest of the roster. Like, you mentioned Spillane, and we haven't mentioned him on this podcast, and we really need to. Like, that guy is playing the lights out. Antonio Pierce is a former linebacker. His new head coach loves that guy. Like, says he's the linchpin of that defense. It's a defense with Max Crosby on it, and he says Spillane is the guy I want in an alley. Like, Spillane has been paying off that faith, and I think when he got signed by the Raiders, very few people went, oh, that's a difference maker. He's been a difference maker over the last month.
Yeah. Steelers could sure use him right now with all their linebacker injuries. Like, they definitely miss him.
Yes, they could.
Speaking of teams that can't get out of their own way, by the way. God damn it. Chargers, Packers.
Oh, man.
What else can you say at this point? You know, Chargers receivers had 6 drops, including 2 drop touchdowns. All of them except one were on 3rd or 4th down. You know, the QJ drop late was just brutal. You know, there were defensive lapses late in the game. Again, you know, the 3rd and 20 is going to live in Chargers fan nightmares forever. I don't know what the solution is here. I mean, I do, but it's a tough pill to swallow. I look at the situation and I know that something has to change. I don't know if they're going to do it. And I don't want to like call for jobs. Like I'm not in this business to call for somebody's job. But how do you look at this team that 5 of their 6 losses are 3 points or less, and they consistently lose very close 1-possession games because of defensive lapses, especially in crucial moments late in the game? Like, how do you look at this team that is so bad in situational football and say, we're good, we can stick with this for the rest of the year? Like, I think it's, in fairness to Chargers, like you have to be fair to Chargers fans and look like you're at least trying, right? And I don't think that anything's going to happen this week. But if they go out and they lose in brutal fashion again to the Ravens, at some point you got to look at this and say, we got to do something, you know?
I think that point is now, and I don't think it's calling for somebody's job. I think it's calling for change. And this is not a quick hook. This is demonstrated ability over a long period of time. And it is the same demonstrated ability, the ability to lose in heartbreaking fashion in close games, to not take a very talented roster and elevate it, to have that spark that says, oh, we've got a chance in every game. And Chargers fans have the opposite of spark right now. They are hopeless about this. They believe this is the outcome no matter what. And that's rough with a roster that talented. You've got Herbert. You've got a very good receiving core. You've got Eckler. You've got a defense full of stars that you've paid. And you cannot, over the last 3+ seasons, make a difference in games that you need to make a difference in. A lot of games, 70% of games in the NFL are one-score games. Like, if you can't win close games, you're not really going to win anything ever. So I'm not here to say Brandon Staley should be fired. I'm here to say, if you're the Chargers, just like you cannot keep running this back. I've seen enough. You said, I think we're going to get to that point. I'm already at that point. I'm not sure what you would say as an administration or as an owner to say, oh, yeah, well, we're going to run it back because he needs what? What does he need to win that he doesn't have? And the answer is, in my opinion, nothing. Like, this team needs a kick in the ass and a little bit of culture to say, no, this is how you win, because winning is a skill. It's not a quarterback stat, but it is a skill, and good teams have it and bad teams don't. And the Chargers do not have it, and they desperately need it.
There's also, again, the Kellen Moore of it all. They're going to lose Kellen. Like, he's going to be a head coach. The question is it going to be for you or somebody else? And when you look at the improvement of the Chargers offense this year, you know, going into this week, they were the second best red zone team in the entire league, like barely behind the Dolphins. It was like 2% behind the Dolphins. They were the 7th highest in terms of, drive success rate, like scoring drive success rate, even though they're 20th off the top of my head in terms of number of possessions. Like, they didn't get very many possessions against Detroit. They had like 9 total drives and scored on 5 of the last 9, right? So from a per drive efficiency standpoint, they're an elite team. They're great in the red zone. Kellen Moore came in and improved so much about this team offensively. And the offense is not usually the reason why they lose. Like, you could argue it was for this week because of all the drops and everything like that, and they didn't execute in the red zone for once. But like, I'm willing to give them a pass one time against Green Bay, looking at the other 10 weeks of the season where they were elite, compared to the defense that did give up several games, you know? So I think the Kellen Moore of it all is like, hey, he's going to get hired somewhere. And at some point, I think the Spanos family will recognize that and say, we should at least see what it looks like, you know? Like, if things are going south and they're out of the playoff race, because right now they're out of the playoff race. If things are going south, like, I could see them saying, like, we got to test this out so that we know going into this hiring cycle what we got to do.
Be nice for them to have some of that on film and see how the team responds. I think of another team in their division, the Raiders, who've had a major culture change. We just talked about them and how much happier everybody, including the owner, is. And make no mistake, that's a really important factor in this. Flipping it over to the other side, Jordan Love played well in this one, and we said in the preview how important these last games down the stretch were for the Packers' future. They are the youngest team in the NFL. They need to know if Jordan Love is the guy, but also their younger receiver core threw their hats in the ring too. We've been wanting to see more of Jaden Reed. He had 46 rushing and 46 receiving, plus a touchdown in this one. Dobbs and Watson both tacked on receiving touchdowns. That's good growth for that young receiving core and that connection between Love and those guys, which is going to be really key if they move on next year, continuing with Jordan Love and say he's the guy. He's going to need that trust. He's going to need that connection, and that offense needs that ability from all those guys to score points. They showed it. That's encouraging for Packers fans.
It was one of, maybe not the, but one of the best games that Love has played as a pro. He got the ball out quickly. He was decisive. He made a couple really nice throws down the field. It was one of the few times this season where I looked at him on film and was like, okay, this might work.
Yeah, that looks like it. That's what you want from an NFL
that looks like
quarterback.
that could work. And again, we talked last week. It's like, hey, this is a really young team. They got young receivers. They got a young quarterback. Like, maybe they just need time to gel. Now, the Chargers defense is one that is easier than most to gel against, but hey, they did it. Like, they went out there and they executed. I'm going to give them credit for that. The thing that I want to see from Jordan Love going forward, because he has to play against the Lions this week, which is a defense that has had quite a few lapses over the last 5-6 weeks, something like that. If he goes out and plays well against the Lions, and then he's got an elite defense in the Chiefs, if he survives the Chiefs, not even plays well, but just survives the Chiefs and looks okay against them, then you got the Giants, you got the Bucks, you got the Panthers, you got the Vikings, and then you finish it up with the Bears. This is a really crucial stretch because there's winnable games in there. They could theoretically go on a run and make up some ground against Minnesota, maybe sneak in as a 7 seed. I'm not saying it's a great shot, but it's a shot. If he does that and he looks just like he did this week in those games, I wouldn't completely rule them out from adding in another quarterback in the day 2, early day 3 range in the draft. But I don't think they would go after one early if he does that, because that stretch, this opportunity to take a team that's 2 games out of it right now to get them into the playoffs. If he does that, I think he's earned another shot in 2024 to make this work long term.
If he looks solid through that stretch of games, because that is a mixed stretch. There are some good teams in there with some good defenses. There are some poor teams in there with very poor defenses. If he stays consistent down the stretch, keeps them in games, gives them a chance, uses the weapons, I think they probably stay with him because they have all the development done. And we know that, yes, you reset the clock when you get a young quarterback, but you also start over with all the rookie mistakes that we're talking about with a DTR or an Aiden or anybody else. And that includes Drake May and Caleb. Like, not everybody, in fact, not anybody so far in the history of the NFL is going to come in and be CJ Stroud. CJ did it, but that was not the consensus on CJ before he got drafted. So all this if we just get a CJ Stroud, that's not how it works. If they if they have a solid product, nobody's ever done it before. So if they have a solid product in Jordan Love and he is giving them a chance every week and looks like he did this week, I don't think they move on. I think they use their picks to bolster the roster around him and say, we can win with this.
Next game on the docket, another young quarterback that literally just last week said had earned another shot in 2024, and we were super excited about the development. In typical Curse fashion, he goes out there and he throws 3 picks, and the Commanders turn it over 6 times, and they lose to Tommy DeVito. It was I'm going to be totally honest here. I still love Sam Howell. I think he's still going to get a shot in 2024. But boy, this was a bad game Like just a straight up, inexcusably bad game. The first pick sailed it over his receiver's head by like 5 yards, got picked off. The second one, I don't know what possessed him to stop while running from pressure and having like Dexter Lawrence and all these guys running him down from behind, and for him to try to stop and set his feet to throw down the field. I'm like, of course you're going to get lit up and then throw a duck and get picked. And then late in the game, the pick six, kind of similar to Aiden O'Connell, where he's just trying to make something happen, but like he put his team in that position to where he needed to make something happen in the first place, right? Because of how careless he was with the ball. Not to mention the other 3 lost fumbles from his skill position players on top of that. It was a horrible, no good, very bad day from the Commanders offense, and how, like, there's no excuses for this one. They lost to Tommy DeVito, who got sacked 9 times, and they still lost handily. Like, it's one of the sloppiest, messiest, worst losses I've seen from any team this year. And honestly, the only real takeaway I have from it is that that's the kind of loss that for Ron Rivera might cost him dearly.
That's the one that kicked over for me about 3/4 of the way through this game. Is this is bad enough that it might start tipping the hand. And there's a lot of talk that with a new owner in Washington, he wants his own guys underneath him as a coaching staff. Ron Rivera's dealt with that, I think, in a pretty diplomatic way, saying, hey, I'm going to go out and coach a football team. I don't have final say in that. Whatever happens, happens, which is coach speak for I'm doing my best here, and if my best isn't good enough, I'm going to get fired anyways. The NFL is weird. The phrase is on any given Sunday, and Tommy DeVito threw and completed about half of the passes that Sam Howell did. But he had 3 times as many TDs because, let me check my notes, Saquon Barkley is a crazy athlete. Like, he bailed him out on some of those catches. And look, he's a tremendous receiver, and they being the Giants, made a lot of hay last year leaning on Saquon for a lot of those wins they got him into the playoffs. Tommy DeVito is a plucky guy. We know that. He's used to getting hit. He played at Syracuse. But the fact that he wins this game over a Commanders team that we feel much more excited about because of that level of, you got to take care of the ball. You can't have as many picks. You got to make better decisions. It feels for Howell, I'm not out on Howell in any stretch. I think he is a good and developing young quarterback, but this is one of those burn the film games. Like, you already know most of that stuff. You're not going to learn a lot from this one. Like, go, man, we gave one up. It is a costly one for us and our team. It is a divisional game. We were better than that team. We should have beat them. We didn't. We got embarrassed. A lot of it is our fault. We're going to go, back to our plan for next week. And we're not going to spend a lot of time looking at what we did badly against the Giants, because you'd be nodding your heads going, yeah, I kind of knew it when I did it. It wasn't great. It cost us the game. It was spread around. It wasn't just Howell. Howell, obviously not good enough, but you talked about the other fumbles. Like, the defense has got to be feeling like, look, we hit that guy. We put that guy on the ground 9 times. Give us a little help here. And they couldn't get it. They lose the game. It does feel like a sort of trash bin film, and move on and keep driving and try and get more wins. I think Howell will move past it. He did it a lot of times in his college career. There's just not a lot to learn from this film.
Fun fact, in home games this season, Washington is averaging 3.4 turnovers per game at home. On the road, it's actually a lot less. It's like 1.4, but it's even less than that, 0.7. So like they're actually a lot safer with the ball when they're away from their own stadium. But that game single-handedly pushed them down into a season-long average of 1.9 per game, which is the second worst in the NFL behind Cleveland. Like, that game moved them like 10 spots down. So, going +6 or -6 in turnover differential it's a good way to lose, EJ. It's a very good way to lose. All right, last game that we'll go over, Seahawks-Rams. This one frustrated me a lot, because it was an incredibly winnable game And the Rams consistently beat the Seahawks when the Seahawks have winnable games. Like, I don't know what it is about the Rams. They just can't get over it. But even if we just take out the Geno injury, and when he's coming back, last drive, right, field goal wins it. They have, a minute 40-something, no timeouts. They got to get to the 40-ish yard line, something like that. So they're driving, get to third down, throws a dart with a hurt elbow to DK, gets them on the fringe of field goal range. The thing that really frustrates me with the Seahawks is when it comes to situational football and knowing what to do in situational football, they've been horrible this year. I'm talking like third worst on third down in the entire NFL. They're in the 20s in red zone execution. Like, they are really bad in situational football. And this very winnable game was another example of them being bad in situational football. So they hit the strike to DK. And after the game, Geno says his headset went out in that moment, right? And so he wasn't getting a play call in. And to me, as a veteran quarterback, right, no timeouts, 20-something seconds on the clock, you should automatically know, even if I'm not getting in my head, we're spiking this thing. Like, we are spiking it. We get potentially 3 plays here. We could still work the middle of the field, get up, spike it for a field goal. Geno, in his head, he was thinking, I need to call a play. The quickest one I can call is let's run inside zone with Zach Charbonnet. And so they run inside zone. It gets 2 yards, sets up like a 55-yard field goal. And they only get 1 play because then it takes them a long time to get people off the pile, and then they spike it. The lack of situational awareness to know, even without a coach telling you, spike it. And Pete said after the game, like, we should have been spiking it. That is what is consistently killing Seattle this year. And that's the reason they lost the game. Like, they were sort of in field goal range, but 55 is not super easy. If you give them a couple plays to get a bigger chunk, to turn it from 55 to 45, we might be looking at a Seahawks win here and them going into Thanksgiving at 7-3. Instead, they lose a very winnable game to the Rams and are 6-4, and now have to scratch, claw, and fight 3 days from now on Thanksgiving against a resurgent Niners team just to stay in the race for the division. I just think this team, as talented as they are, and as much as we love Geno, and as much as we love the receivers, their situational football is so bad this year that I don't know what to make of their chances in January, because that's when you need to be best at situational ball, and they're horrible at it.
They need to be sharper. There's no question. McVay was smiling all the way to the bank on this one. He knew that his team shouldn't have won this game on a couple instances, but again, when the universe, hands you lemons, you make lemonade. When it hands you cookies, you just freaking eat them. And he was sitting on the sideline eating them. The Rams just own the Hawks, and this goes back before McVay. This goes back to, the Holmgren era, when the Rams would have teams that weren't as good. They would come up and take games from Seattle. They're not the rivals to the Seahawks. That's definitely the Niners. But in terms of the thorn in your side, the Rams have been that for the Seahawks for a long time. McVay is 10-5 versus Pete. McVay has more wins versus Pete than any other coach. This is not a new thing. And the Rams got a huge boost. The officials called a phantom, pass interference call on Witherspoon when Puka tripped in the end zone. He literally tripped on another defender. Spoon was just standing next to him. They give him a fresh set of downs. What would have been not a touchdown turns into a touchdown. And McVay knew it. And look, you're not going to argue with that as a coach, but he just smiled and said, we have to execute. And what you're talking about with the Seahawks is when those things happen for them, good or bad, they don't execute. And then they go, oh, if we would have got a call. You can't leave it up to the officials. Officials are going to make bad calls for everybody. Sometimes they go for you. Sometimes they go against you. But if you put yourself in this situation, you give yourself 10 extra yards on the field goal, even for your very reliable field goal kicker, you can't put yourself in those spots. And the Seahawks do over and over again. The short week is really rough. We're going to talk about this as we switch over to playoff seeding, but could have been going in for a huge matchup on Thanksgiving with an even record against their rival at home. That game could have been even bigger. Now, through no fault of their own, they limp into it a little bit. We'll talk about the Geno injury. They need him down the stretch. Drew Lock ain't it 100%. Drew Lock came in, And the Seahawks offense went completely flat. They did nothing after Drew Lock came in. He is not the answer. They need Geno healthy and on the field. They might have him. Took a nasty shot. Has a bruise on his tricep right behind his elbow. Did come in, throw some late strikes. That's good. But now he's got a short week. He's got a tough defense. It's probably going to be cold up here on Thanksgiving Day. That's not going to help. That's not going to, or Thanksgiving evening, actually. That's just like, you had the chance here. It was right there in front of it, and you didn't seize it. And I'm with you. Good teams seize those opportunities. They find those ways to win close games against division foes. Hawks don't do it consistently enough.
On the flip side, for the Rams, great win for them, right? Love that they're still showing fight in a season that has not really gone their way at all. And even going into the year, we made notes of the fact that very young team, kind of anchored by phenomenal veterans, but like it's a few really good old guys and a bunch of kids on this roster, right? So like there was going to be growing pains. We knew that. Rams fans I've seen express some frustration also with the Seahawks' lack of situational awareness, because they are now one of the teams that knows they're not going to make the playoffs, probably. And they are now no longer one of the 3-win teams, so they dropped from the 7th pick to the 14th pick, if you're paying attention to draft order at this time of year. And believe me, on Rams Twitter, they are definitely paying attention to draft order. So I think this win from LA, I think they're out of the Caleb and May sweepstakes at this point. Like I don't think there's any way they even have a shot at getting either of them. But there still needs to be a succession plan in place for Stafford long term, and that's really what a lot of Rams fans are thinking about, is like, what are we going to do? Because he's not going to play with us forever, right? And now we don't have any shot at Caleb or May. We're probably not going to have a shot at whoever QB3 is, whether it's McCarthy or Daniels or Nix or whoever. And so now, the off-season plans for the Rams significantly changed yesterday. And I know it sounds early to be talking about that, but it's not. It's really not. And I think the overall projection for what the Rams are going to be doing was massively altered yesterday. And I think that should be taken into account.
It's not too early to start talking about that. Stafford also got knocked out of the game yesterday. He did come back because he's Matt freaking Stafford, and he's built out of iron. He's taken a million of those horrible shots and come back to play. Played pretty well. He is not going to play forever. And if he decides that's it, I'm done taking punishment, I'm going to hang it up, which there was some sort of hue and cry this offseason that last year might be that year, that he might not come back for this year. Rams would have been in a much different place, but they probably wouldn't have, they definitely wouldn't have the wins that they do with him at quarterback, and they would be in a very different position, positioning themselves for their future quarterback. As it is now, mid-pack, it's not going to get you one of the top quarterbacks, and they are going to have to figure out what they're going to do. If they're lucky and Stafford comes back for one more year and his arm doesn't fall off, maybe they make it. Maybe they make another run. Maybe that's their bridge, but that's a maybe, and you don't have the other option now. So, yeah, Les Snead and company are definitely thinking about, so what do we do now?
Let's talk about the rest of the NFC playoff race, which the Rams just did their part to shake up significantly. This one is going to be a lot quicker than when we talk about the AFC, full disclosure. And there's good reason for that, right? 9 teams in the NFC out of 16. So the majority of teams in the NFC are at 4 wins or fewer. There's very few teams that are actually like 500 or above in the NFC. And right now, if we're looking at, like the ESPN playoff machine, which is kind of how you can go through week by week and test out different scenarios and see how it affects seeding. But right now, as it stands, before the Chiefs and Eagles game, because we're recording this Monday morning, so first seed is Philly, second seed is Detroit, third seed is San Francisco, fourth seed is the Saints. Those are your 4 division winners. Your wild card teams are Dallas in the 5th seed, Seattle in the 6th seed, Minnesota in the 7th seed. Seattle and San Francisco play on Thanksgiving this week. We're still not 100% sure if Geno's going to go. Like Pete said, I don't know. But with an elbow contusion and knowing Geno, like he's probably going to go, right? So that game in itself is massive in terms of determining seeding. But my overall question is, with the Vikings in the 7th seed, essentially 2 games ahead of everybody else in the conference with 7 to go, it is somewhat unlikely that the 7 teams that are in right now are going to change, barring a shift in the NFC South where it's a little bit tighter for the division race. But it's pretty much either these 7 teams, maybe the Falcons make a push to knock off the Saints, and maybe, this one's even less likely, maybe the Packers make a push for the 7 seed. But again, that depends on Jordan Love playing a lot better. What I want to know from you, EJ, is looking at this current group of 7, do you think that these are the final NFC playoff field? We just don't know who's going to be what seed yet.
It feels like it to me, and it also reminds me that I really wish they'd update the playoff rules, because the Saints are just dead weight. They're 5-5 right now. They're worse than every other team we talked about, and they are significantly better than everybody in their division at the same time. Like, the NFC South just probably shouldn't have a playoff contender this year. That's just the way it is. They don't look like they're positioned to make a run. I would put way more money on the Packers making a run than the Saints or anybody else from the NFC South. So yeah, I think these are the teams in terms of final seeding. Does feel like the Niners will probably best the Hawks, especially since they've got that huge game just 3-4 days from now when they come to Seattle. Geno nursing an injury, the Niners looking like the Niners again. That's probably going to be the way that goes. Doesn't seem like the Cowboys are going to let up very much. If the Eagles stumble, which I don't really see them doing, yes, the Cowboys could take that division, but I really don't see that happening. So, yep, it's feeling like we have a pretty good idea in the NFC who's going to be there. A run would have to be really significant. Like, the wheels would have to fall off the Vikings. Kevin O'Connell's got them playing really well under Josh Dobbs, so I don't see that happening. And the Packers and Jordan Love would have to be sort of flawless down the stretch. Don't really see that happening. So the shakeup in the NFC, not super likely. Guys, some teams might flip-flop position in terms of division winner versus definitely in the playoffs. But overall, this is probably our group.
In quick defense of the Saints, by the way, because I know we have a lot of Saints fans that listen to this show, they're going to take offense to us completely writing them off, including our friend Adney, who lives in Texas, but he's a Saints fan. I want to acknowledge, yes, they are a strong defensive team. They are top 10 in terms of overall scoring defense because they're good at keeping teams out of the red zone. But once teams get into the red zone, or rather, if they play against a team that's very good at getting into the red zone, like Dallas, who, if the playoffs started today, they would have to play Dallas in the first round, 4 seed hosting 5 seed. Their red zone defense is really bad, like mid-20s in terms of touchdown efficiency in the red zone. Their red zone offense is also bad. They're really bad on third down on offense. Like, situational football is not the Saints' friend. And if you want to win in January, you have to be good in situational football. Like, they are similar to the Seahawks, but not as good as the Seahawks. Like, they're not by much, but they're a slightly lesser version of that Seattle team, in my opinion. And Seattle just happens to have a better quarterback in Geno. But like, it's a tough matchup for them. So even if they're gonna make it, like they're probably gonna make it. Like, they're the best team in the NFC South this year. Do I have any faith in them actually beating Dallas in the first round? Not really. So like, I understand the frustration with a lot of people that are looking at whoever the NFC South sends to the playoffs at like a barely over 500 record, and they're like, are they the 4th best team in the NFC? No, but they're the 4th seed. It is what it is. The rules kind of suck sometimes. All right, AFC. This one's a lot tougher because there are 9 teams, like we said, of 4 wins or fewer in the NFC, and there's only 4 of those in the entire AFC. 12 teams in the AFC are above 4 wins. It's a slaughterhouse, all right? It's a destruction derby. It's going to be really, really nerve-wracking down the stretch here, seeing all these teams constantly shift in and out of like the 5 through 7 seed. And even then, like we could see some shifts at top of division as well. Like the Jags and Texans are basically playing for the division this week, because the Jags are at 7-3, the Texans are at 6-4. If they win and it's 7-4, Texans have tiebreaker, and it would be a tough hill to climb for the Jags to, like, if you're just looking at the schedules down the stretch, it would be a tough hill to climb for the Jags to win that division if they lose this week. So there's a lot up in the air for the AFC. As of right now, if the playoffs started today, what it's looking like is KC at the first seed, surprise, surprise. Baltimore at the second seed, Jacksonville at the third seed, temporarily. Miami at the fourth seed. Those are your division leaders. And then in the 5 through 7 seeds, you have Cleveland, Houston, and Pittsburgh at the 7. Now, we talked earlier about not having a whole lot of hope in Pittsburgh at this point. They had a lot of blood magic kind of carry them through the first 10 weeks of the season that may or may not have run out at this point. I'm not entirely sure if they're going to be able to hang on to that 7 seed. You have Denver coming on late here. They're playing a lot better. You're also looking at another 5-win team in Vegas that maybe could make a little bit of a push. I would say Indy maybe could make a little bit of a push, but there's still a lot more up in the air in the AFC than the NFC. This current group of 7 that I listed off before, do you think that is the final group? And if not, who do you think gets in?
There's going to be a lot more jockeying on this side, and I think possibly even a lot more jockeying for division leads, which really starts to shake things up, because if you are, you're in the division lead and you end up losing it, then you've got a very competitive field in the AFC nipping at your heels for all these, like you said, 5 through 7 seeds. And the Broncos are the interesting one in the West, because I have more faith in how the Broncos are playing right now than I do the Steelers. And if you're talking about that 5 through 7 mix, if you said today, do you think the Broncos are going to kick the Steelers out and take a spot? My answer would be emphatically, yeah, sure feels like that based on how both of those teams have played over the last, say, 3 weeks. Ravens 8-3. It's weird that they're not the top seed, but that's what, the extra loss is going to do to you. And then all the other NFC North teams, it feels like the Browns have to hang on. Steelers, I don't feel like they do for all the reasons we've talked about. And then Jaguars and Texans feels to me a lot like Bills and Dolphins, right? They're 2 teams within a game of each other, the top of their division. They're playing each other earlier than Bills and Dolphins are. But like you said, that game's going to set the course for, are we making this a tough hill to climb? I think both of those teams make it. I hope both of those teams make it, because I think they're 2 of the best teams in the conference, and I want to see them in the playoffs. So, probably Steelers slipping out, maybe Broncos slipping in. Other than that, it's who gets the top spot in each division, but the other team definitely feels like they're going to make it if they don't.
What's interesting about the Bills situation, and they did look a lot better on offense against the Jets, from a play-by-play efficiency standpoint, they were roughly the same as the Ken Dorsey era. But in terms of scoring drive efficiency, they were way better. Way better in terms of being able to actually put points on the board and not stall out. So what they did a good job of was once they got within striking distance of being within striking distance, they stopped fucking it up. They weren't stalling out. The turnover issue, thankfully, didn't rear its ugly head, which wasn't really like a Ken Dorsey problem, throwing bad picks and balls bouncing off receivers' hands. They happened to not be super snake bitten in this game, which played in their favor. But if you're looking at their run pass rate in that kind of crucial fringe, almost in field goal range, they were the highest in the NFL last week in terms of run rate. They just got yards. They got into field goal position and they stayed in field goal position. So no matter what, they were getting points out of most of their drives, which was a problem they were having, is they would almost get in position to score and then not score because they kept stalling. They weren't stalling this week. So that does give me hope for the Bills going forward. However, again, we got 7 games to go.
Yep.
If you're looking at their schedule down the stretch, so they're playing against the Eagles, then they're playing against the Chiefs, then the Cowboys, then you got the Chargers, obviously winnable there, then you got the Patriots, very winnable there, and then you're finishing with the Dolphins. So not 7 games, 6 games to go, excuse me. But 4 of those 6 are against like elite teams in the NFL, right? And they already dropped their tiebreaker to Denver. If you're looking at Denver's schedule down the stretch, they also have to deal with the Browns and they have to deal with the Texans, but then they get the Chargers, then they got to deal with the Lions, then they finish with Patriots, Chargers again, and Raiders. Like, it's a little bit more manageable than the Bills' schedule. So the Bills not only have to make up ground, but they have to firmly like not even allow that tiebreaker to even be a factor. Like if they finish with the same record, they're out, right? So they're in a unique position of technically only being a game back in the division, but still not even in the playoffs if they started today, because all of the losses they've had have been hugely consequential in tiebreakers. Like they've consistently shot themselves in the foot in terms of losing on these tiebreakers. So I don't know what's going to happen with Buffalo. Like, you could sell me either way on like, yeah, they're going to be there or yeah, they're not. But they have to hit basically every green light down the stretch to make this, because they cost themselves so much in the first half of the season.
What felt like a potentially inconsequential game against the Broncos turns out to be anything but, because of the Broncos' resurgence. And like you said, if you're not going to win the division, which kind of feels like the way they have to do it, it almost feels like they're going to have to get some help from the Dolphins to do that. Like the Dolphins are going to have to hit a skid, which could happen, but doesn't look super likely right now. You know, those motion graphics with the bar graphs that are chronological and it goes through time and the bars, there's going to be so much more motion in the AFC one than there is in the NFC one. And you're going to see like 3 and 4 spot drops because of situations like this with the Bills and who they've played well against and who they haven't. And yeah, that slate down the finishing stretch, not friendly to the Bills. They are going to have to continue to play well, limit mistakes. They did look more cohesive is the word I'll use against the Jets. They seemed to be able to string more things together. It felt more sort of fated that those drives were going to end with something and not just kind of fizzle out for some seemingly unknown reason or bad consequence. And that's against a good defense in the Jets. So that's encouraging. They're going to need more of that. And if you really dug into, I love the Ken Dorsey era. Is that an era? I guess it is.
Technically, yeah.
Technically, that's the thing that they didn't have is, again, situationally per play in terms of what they earned and where they scored from and everything else, they were good. But when you looked at the play-to-play sort of linked together consistency and what, you know, people don't like to call momentum, I'm using the term cohesiveness, it felt like it was much more likely to jump the tracks and get you nothing. And yesterday felt less like that. So that's a good step in the right direction, but man, they're going to need to lean on it. And holy cow, they can't take any more injuries in the secondary. Like, honestly, if I played in the Buffalo secondary right now, dude, I might just say, you know, I'm out. It's like a, you know, Final Destination movie, right?
It's just hazard pay at this point, man. Like it's
just
it's
for being
terrible.
There. Yeah, I haven't seen a unit that hard hit that consistently, because it happened last year too. Like the secondary took a lot of bad injuries last year as well. They've done it again this year, and it's been, if anything, even worse. And that's so surprising, and that's going to plague them down the stretch. You mentioned a bunch of the best passing offenses in the NFL that they have to go against in this last 6 games. They can't afford to be shorthanded. So it looks pretty good right now, but if I'm a Buffalo fan, I'm worried about this last 6 games.
Yeah, it's not going to be a fun November and December in Western New York. Like, they still might make it, but it could be by the skin of their teeth. Anyway, that'll wrap it up for this week's show. Again, we don't have a second show because, you know, Thanksgiving, family, all that kind of stuff. Like, we should actually see our family at some point. So we'll be back next Monday with the Week 12 recap, where I'm sure everything that we talked about today with playoff seeding will be entirely irrelevant. But either way, bunch of good games on the docket this week, looking at the Thanksgiving slate, looking at the Sunday slate, the primetime slate. This year is backloaded for sure in terms of quality matchups. So a lot to look forward to. We'll talk about it all on Monday. Thank you all for watching. Thank you to our executive producer tier over on Patreon, Marat, Consti, Andrew, Liam, Connor, and Mike L. Couldn't do this without you guys. And with that, EJ, let's get out of here.
Happy holidays.